A Musical Life with Dacia Clay, host of the Classical Classroom podcast. Dacia Clay is the music librarian for Houston Public Media's Classical 91.7 station, as well as the host and co-producer of Classical Classroom, a weekly podcast that helps listeners learn more about the world of classical music. What makes this show so interesting is the fact that Dacia has a deep, dark secret. This episode of A Musical Life is brought to you by Audible.com, the leading source of audiobooks online with over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, or MP3 player. Visit audibletrial.com/A Musical Life and get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial. Welcome to A Musical Life. I'm Hugh Sung. I first learned about Dacia Clay and the Classical Classroom podcast from my good friend, composer Darren Hagen, who was featured in Dacia's show. His interview on A Musical Life, by the way, will be up in a few episodes, so be sure to subscribe to be notified about that. Each week, Dacia invites a classical music artist or teacher to come on to her show and give her homework assignments that cover different topics. If you're new to classical music or just curious about it, and feel intimidated by all the mumbo-jumbo musical jargon, then Classical Classroom is the perfect podcast for you. Dacia is fun, witty, and refreshingly honest in sharing what she likes and doesn't like, as well as what she doesn't know and wants to learn. Now, I'm so excited to introduce you to Dacia Clay. Oh, by the way, she said that she's never been interviewed before, so this is her first time being on the other side of the microphone. Now that I think about it, we may have to interrogate Dacia to make sure she's fully qualified. Dacia, thank you so much for being on the show. It's so exciting to hear your voice after listening to so many of your podcasts. This is so cool.
I'm glad to be here, Hugh. I'm really glad that you're doing your show, too.
Why, thank you. Well, listen, first things first, we have to get our priorities straight for this interview.
Okay.
You're quite a Star Wars fan, aren't you?
It's in my blood.
Kindred spirit. Now, is it true you've named your car the Millennium Falcon?
That is correct. It came out of the factory a Yaris, but when it came into my possession, it became the Millennium Falcon. Yes.
And yeah. Do you have these secret compartments where you can, stash booty and hide and things like that?
Of course.
Whenever you're running contraband across some imperial space, right?
Yeah, which I do often. So,
of course. And how fast can you make the Kessel Run?
Oh my God, I forgot the answer to this question.
It's the wrong answer. What is it? They say 1 parsec.
12 parsecs.
12 parsecs, right?
12 parsecs,
and that's the totally wrong measurement, right?
Right.
Okay, and that's we have to clear you for to make sure that you're actually approved for this interview. So, original or special edition Star Wars?
Oh, original.
Of course. There you go.
Yeah.
And your thoughts on the prequel movies?
I am so excited. When I first heard that it was coming out and that Disney was involved, I was kind of like, I don't know. Yeah. But then I heard that J.J. Abrams was involved.
Yeah.
And I have seen some of the previews. Mm-hmm. And quick funny story, I actually when the first trailer came out, I was watching it at my desk, which is in the middle of the newsroom here at Houston Public Media. Mm-hmm. And so I'm watching it on my headphones. And then after it's over, I look behind me and the entire newsroom is gathered around my computer and they're like, play it again. Yeah.
Oh, this is so cool. It's nice to know that there are Star Wars fans in the classical music world, eh?
Oh, yeah. People are stoked.
Cool. Okay, your favorite Star Wars movie up to this point?
Okay, so it's a tie between the original, the very first one, and Return of the Jedi.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised. A lot of people usually say The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I like Empire, but for some reason, I think because I was old enough as a kid to like really remember that one in the theater. And, I remember seeing the Ewoks, which I know they annoy some people, but I love the Yub Nub song. I mean, yeah, it's good stuff.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I think we vetted you for a musical life. I think we. Yeah, this is going to be fun. Okay, so let's dive into your story a little bit. Now You've had some radio experience way back in 2002 when you spent a year working on audio production at KAOS Radio. Do you say Chaos Radio or do you say KAOS?
Yeah, they call it Chaos.
Awesome.
Yeah. I was attending the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, and I actually got to see, I lived right across the street from the Performing Arts Center there in Olympia, and I went across the street and saw Ira Glass speak.
Oh.
And
wow.
And it was the coolest thing. He did this great thing where at the beginning of the show, he has the lights down and you just hear his voice, and it was very dramatic. It was awesome.
Wow.
And I got really inspired, and I went out probably in the next couple of days after that, and I went to the radio station and I was like, I would like to volunteer here, please.
So it's really thanks to Ira Glass that you got the radio bug. Is that right?
Absolutely. That guy is amazing.
It's incredible. Well, so I'm coming to my key question here. With your passion of radio, your experience with Ira Glass, what made you pursue a degree in library and information sciences instead of communications? Since I'm making a stereotype here, but I usually associate people who go into radio and TV and broadcast as being communication majors for the most part.
Yeah, I don't, my first love was writing. I've been a writer since I was 12 years old. I would get up early in the morning before school and sit there and write for a couple of hours. And like, that's kind of always been my thing. And I had this real love for books that my mom, instilled in me at a young age. Fell really in love with literature as a teenager and just read constantly. And so I just really loved books, and I thought, well, obviously I can't live on a bookstore salary, but I could be a librarian. I could help people find books. This would be wonderful. And I actually, because of a librarian, I got into radio.
Oh.
Because I had decided, when I was a supervisor, that I would go to library school, get my degree. And I got into library school, and as my supervisor at that time had warned me, it was so boring.
No,
He actually told me, he was like, don't do it. You're going to be so bored. Well, so I and I got into it, and I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this, because I was just imagining this life ahead of me of dealing with call numbers and all of this. All of a sudden, this was all becoming very real, So, but then, so I left school for like a semester. Well, one day I was listening to a show on NPR, and at the end of it, they read the credits, and they said, and our reference librarian, Key Molesky.
Ah.
And I went, what?
Light bulb.
Yeah. And all of a sudden I was like, I could be a librarian in radio. And so I went and I found Key Molesky online.
Really?
And yeah.
Oh,
and
you did some stalking there.
I did a little stalking, and I wrote Key an email and said, I think verbatim, I want to be you when I grow up. Tell me how to do it. And she wrote me back this wonderful, like, really gracious, she was just so forthcoming with information, and told me about groups that I should join, classes that I should take. And then when I got into my last semester of library school, I started bugging the classical program director over here, or I guess at the time arts and culture director. Can't remember his title. Sorry. Anyway, You might want to take that out. Program director. And I was like, I think you need a librarian. And I sent that email many times. And finally, he wrote back and was like, you know what? I think we need a librarian. What do you? And then I came in for an interview and started out part-time and then moved up.
Why the art? Why the music? Why the classical music division? Why not say just the news division? I'm sure there's a lot of need for librarians in the news, for archives and things like that. Why music? Why classical music?
You know, that was their need at the time. I didn't really seek out any particular sort of librarianing. At the station, I was just like, you need a librarian? What needs organizing? Put me to it. And it wound up being the classical music library, which was a hot mess. And so I spent a long time cleaning that thing up. And, then started doing some archival projects with the American Archives Project and got to do some pretty cool stuff with that library, actually.
Was it intimidating not knowing the classical music lingo, so to speak? Or does your degree really help you to organize any sort of information, even if you haven't studied that subject?
Well, that is kind of the lovely thing about a library degree, is that if you go to school and you learn those skills, you can apply them to any subject. I mean, I remember at the Evergreen State College Library, one of the things that they had in their catalog was a stuffed rooster. So, so you can, and actually, I personally am in a library catalog.
Oh, really?
At the University of St. Thomas, my friend who was a cataloging librarian. Created a cataloging record for me so she could teach me about cataloging.
Sure.
And so she added my parents as the authors and my birth year as my publication date, and I actually got a tattoo of that after I
That is so
after
cool.
I left. Yeah, so it's on my arm now. Everybody can see what year I was born, which I totally did not think about.
Oops.
When I got the tattoo. Yeah.
So you're telling me that every library has these hidden Easter eggs.
Yeah, and you really can. I would say every library that I've worked in, yeah, and there's some, like, for some reason in the classical music library here, there is a beef cookery cookbook. Okay. I don't know why,
okay,
but it's there, and I cataloged it because it was there. So, but yeah, you can use those. Back to your question, that any thing that is put in front of you as a librarian, you can catalog, but it helps to get to know your subject, so that you can. I think that gives you power to organize it even better.
Sure. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing back around 2013. Is that right? You complained to the classical music announcer there, Chris Johnson, who's the host of Afternoon Drive at Houston Public Media, that you didn't understand what any of the classical announcers were saying or talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to say, not just you, but a vast majority of folks, I have to confess. And you actually came up with the idea of producing a show to make them come on and explain it all to you, as you said in your first podcast episode. That became, of course, the show Classical Classroom, which is now available as a very popular weekly podcast. Now, in the intro to every show, you give this really interesting confession.
My name is Dacia Clay. I'm the audio librarian here at Classical 91.7. While I'm a real librarian, I have a deep, dark secret. I know very little about classical music. I grew up listening to rock, and I know something about jazz. But when it comes to classical, I really want to learn. So, every week on this show, a classical music expert will give me a piece of classical music they think I should know, and then we'll discuss it. Come learn with me in the Classical Classroom.
So, what were some of your favorite bands or artists to listen to when you were growing up?
Oh man, my parents had us really young, and so they loved to go out still when we were, I remember being 7 years old and them, coming back from a Devo concert, and they would go see people like that and Blondie, and I think they even saw the Ramones.
Wow.
And, so that was the music I remember most. And, growing up, of course, on MTV when it was,
music.
Still actual music
Yeah.
television.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just sitting there. I would sit in front of the TV with my little Play School tape recorder and record it for some reason. I don't know what I was planning on doing with
You're planning on
those tapes.
archiving it, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Cataloging it.
Yeah, but I think that when I was growing up, I really loved the Ramones and dancey stuff like that.
How cool.
Yeah.
And so
Missing Persons.
Uh-huh,
And that was good, like the new wave music.
So you really had the world's coolest parents.
Yeah, they were pretty awesome. They I got grounded and stuff like that. But they were really, really great parents and really interesting parents. They've always, and they still are, really interested in, what's going on in popular culture and, being in touch with the world in its current state instead of kind of living in the past, like I think a lot of people tend to do when they get older.
Really interesting. Yeah. Well, given that environment, that you were, you had a home environment that was steeped in pop culture, that your parents would love this and you love this. And my personal experience, it's almost folks who love pop really stay away from classical music with a 10-foot pole. So what in the world inspired you to come up with this idea of exploring classical music with this show?
Well, I had tried a couple of little online series before. I came up with a thing called Meta Radio where I was interviewing the people inside of the radio station to, tell me their stories, and I would post those things online. And I just really enjoyed being involved in, writing and creating an audio series because, Ira Glass is my guy.
Of course.
So, when I realized that this was such an issue for me, working around all of these classical music people and really having no idea what they were talking about. Most of them were very nice, and they would tell some kind of, esoteric joke, and then they would all start laughing, and I would just be standing there going, I had no idea.
Oh, no,
Most of them would explain it to me. Some of them would just point and laugh.
Aww.
But I was like, I want to learn.
Yeah.
I've been around this stuff for, a couple of years. I feel like I should get to know this subject. And, why not kind of couple that with my desire to produce a show. And so my boss was like, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Just like that.
I don't really think he thought it was sort of an innocuous, little audio series that I would do once or twice, and then it would probably fizzle out. And I didn't know what was going to happen with it. But
Little did everybody know, you really touched a big nerve, I think, culturally, yeah?
Apparently. I've been just so overwhelmed with the response that we've gotten from the show. And I think what I hear more often than anything when fans of the show write in or, when I talk to people, is that they enjoy the perspective of a novice because I think a lot of people are afraid to ask those questions. And as one person put it to me, I take a bullet for them.
Okay, well, listen, I don't tell anybody. Well, it's too late. We're on a podcast. I have a confession to make. Now, I entered the Curtis Institute of Music when I was 13.
My God.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, but you know what? I had no idea what classical music was all about.
What were you doing at the Curtis Institute?
I know. I got in kind of like a playing monkey or something. I could play, I could ape it, but I didn't understand it. And I remember one time walking through. There's a beautiful park right in front of Curtis, the old building. I remember asking one of my friends as we were walking through the park, Rittenhouse Square, what do you listen for? I just don't understand what's going on when I hear classical music. Sometimes I would sit in on a performance and it would put me instantly to sleep. In fact, I would say probably 80% of the time. and then other times, every once in a while, I'd hear something and it would keep me on the edge of my seat. And what drove me crazy, I just didn't understand why. Why did I like one performance and not another? And as you've alluded to, I think by taking the bullet for so many folks, I think we all appreciate that your shows, you present yourself as being completely honest about your knowledge as well as your reactions to the music that you talk about with all of your guest teachers. And I think most importantly, it's okay not to know everything and to ask real questions.
Mm-hmm. I'm a huge believer in that in any area of life. I don't think that there's anything at all wrong with ignorance. We're all ignorant to begin with. We're little tabula rosas, and like there's nothing to be ashamed of. But we're all responsible for sort of fixing that situation, and as long as you're willing to ask questions and not let your ego get involved and not be ashamed of the fact that you don't know, I think that you learn a lot that way.
Somehow, I don't know what it is. It must be the classical music world or the culture that we grow up in, or maybe are surrounded with, or maybe even just our misconceptions. But, as a classical musician, it can be very intimidating to admit ignorance. Yes. Very intimidating. And and to be honest, it can sometimes be hard to hear classical music with fresh ears, especially when you're so involved with it on a daily basis. I remember one of your interviews, I think, the gentleman you were speaking to made that same confession. He is a radio announcer. He listens to classical music, 8 hours a day for his job. And then when he goes home, he doesn't.
Yeah, that's right. That was Chris.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really funny. I think he said he went home and listened to Kesha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I imagine, is it easier for you as an outsider, quote unquote, outsider, to approach the subject and ask the questions that you do? It must be.
I'm sure because, like you said, I have no preconceptions. I have a love of music and I have ears, but, and I have a certain understanding of the history, or at least the time in which a lot of the music was written. But, outside of that, I'm hearing a lot of times when you're listening to Classical Classroom, I am literally hearing the music for the first time ever. And so, yeah, I think it is easier for me to hear what's going on in a way. Like I kind of have the upper hand in that way. And I also don't have any, I don't feel like I need to respond in any particular way. Like if I think something sucks, I say, I kind of think that sucks.
I was listening to your first episode and I was so struck with your honest opinion. You were listening to two versions of the Vivaldi Four Seasons, I believe it was the Autumn Movement. Same piece, but played by two different artists. One was Itzhak Perlman. The other one was an Italian Baroque violinist. And your answer was just a personal, honest opinion. I liked Itzhak Perlman's version. And I can't tell you how many people, and I believe the person who was interviewing you who you were interviewing at that time, he actually said, well, I like this other version better because of blah, blah, blah. I can't tell you how many times was so intimidated to almost bullied into liking a certain performance because a teacher would say, well, this is a better performance than such and such, or, oh, they didn't play it as well as so-and-so. And you are almost left to, feel like, my opinion isn't good enough. I have to mold my opinion into somebody else's. And I think that's a huge setback. And what I loved about your show and the whole premise of your show is that in many ways, you have tremendous courage to just say it as you feel it. And believe it or not, I think a lot of classical musicians, we're intimidated to have that kind of courage. We're intimidated by we want to be respected by our peers. And yet, you just put it all out there. It's fantastic. It's so refreshing.
Well, thank you. But you know what? I think that is true in so many um, subcultures, I guess is the word for it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I tend to listen to more indie rock,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember reading this thing that I thought summed it up so well, like what it's like to hang out with people who are, really into a genre of music. And this thing that I read was talking about the indie rock world, and they said, remember when it became okay for us to like Prince? And I was like, oh my God, that is it exactly.
Yeah.
Because you feel like, you don't want to admit that you like the dorky thing in front of your peers. And in the classical music world, I think there's this extra added layer where it's not just about being cool. It's not about liking the right things to fit in with people. It's about sort of showing your intellectual prowess. It's about a whole kind of other layer of stuff.
Uppermensch, you're just showing like you've got the superiority complex.
Yeah, and I think the classical music world is like wonderfully interesting because there is so much to delve into. I mean, it's music that's been around since humans have been around, potentially when you're talking about this music.
Yeah.
But and so there is so much to know. And it's been so refined, and it's been there are so many just virtuoso players out there, and people who have done incredible things, and I feel like all of those ingredients sort of come together to form something that is potentially very scary to open your mouth and talk about. Because you feel like you need to know all of those things in order to be able to speak about it, even just to say what you think about a piece of music.
Yeah, honestly too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the classical music world could certainly use with a much bigger dose of letting folks express exactly how they feel, whether they know something or not, and just encouraging more of an environment of asking questions, any questions. No question is too silly or trite or unimportant to answer.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I think that that asking questions is how you get to that point. That's how you learn. That's how we all learn. And I think that it would be, and I have to say that I have felt incredibly lucky doing this show. People have been so generous with the information that they have given me. They've been so patient. They don't point and laugh at me. They're very kind, and they're excited to share the information. So I hope that if our show accomplishes anything, aside from entertaining you, it's to let people know it's okay to ask those questions because people really want to answer them.
But I think a lot of credit has to go to you and your team. You guys are doing such a fantastic job selecting the artists to come on the show who have that genuine warmth and generosity to share with your listeners and with you.
Oh man, we have been so lucky with the guests that we've had on. I mean, Todd Holsander, our audio producer, he went to the Peabody Institute, and so I got really lucky connecting with Todd because he came with all of this knowledge and weirdly believed in this idea that I had, and, and then brought all of these people that he just happened to know from school onto the show, and it kind of went from there.
Oh wow! So Todd has been a tremendous resource and a way to connect with some of these artists. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he is 3/4 of the show, I just sit there and ask questions, pretty much.
Well,
He's great.
you recently celebrated your 100th episode of Classical Classroom. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Amazing accomplishments.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Classical Classroom. I'm Dacia Clay, and...
Surprise!
What? Oh, you guys! I can't believe you're throwing us a surprise party for our 100th episode. It look like everybody's here. There's Bach and Beethoven and the Schumanns. Is it Brahms? Brahms, is that you? And who's that over there? Mozart? Salieri? Oh, look, they're hanging out. Weird. Ravel? All the way from Paris? Man. And my old teachers! Oh my god, my old teachers are here too. This is fantastic. Look, here's my very first teacher, Chris Johnson. How you doing, Chris? Good to see you.
Hey, Dacia. Good to see you. I've missed you. I think about you often when I listen to Classical Classroom, and I'm so excited for your 100th show. Your birthday show, your 100th anniversary show. I don't know what you call that, but anyway.
Well, thanks, Chris.
You know, when I see and hear the folks that you have as your guests or your teachers or whatever, I'm humbled to have been a part of it from the very beginning. And I think back fondly to this one particular day where I was standing in the CD library and you came in and we were talking and you were like, hey, by the way, I've got this idea for a podcast. And you started talking to me about Classical Classroom.
I remember.
And I have to say, I don't know if my face revealed it, but my first thought was, why didn't I think of that?
So after all those episodes, are there any pieces of classical music that you've connected with on a personal level or have genuinely fallen in love with since producing the show?
Yeah, you know, I have really come to love Stravinsky.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Rite of Spring. I mean, actually, most of the Stravinsky that I've heard. I really liked. I've liked a lot of contemporary, more contemporary than Stravinsky. Like people who are writing now, like Missy Mazzoli.
Mm-hmm.
Really loved her song from the Uproar.
Mm-hmm.
I've really liked a lot of Nico Muley's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's one I'm leaving out. Who is the composer of God music? Oh, Crumb.
Oh, George Crumb, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That I really dug.
That's amazing. I mean, it's not the answer I would have expected for somebody.
Really?
But again, given your wonderful exposure, it seems that it's really giving you a taste for a lot of really adventurous music.
Yeah, well, I really like that, and the other music that I listen to. I really like contemporary sounding stuff.
How cool!
It's I don't know. I feel like it captures what is relevant to us right now. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning of this episode a bit because as I was listening to some of your episodes, I was really delighted to listen to the episode where you were discussing leitmotifs in Star Wars music by John Williams with Brett Mitchell. That was such a cool episode. So amazing. So amazing.
So why don't we just start at the beginning of the very first film, right?
Okay.
So, and by first film, let's be honest, we're talking about the 1977 film, okay? Not the 1999 film, for heaven's sakes, Phantom Menace. Menace, indeed. So the very first thing that you hear is the very famous Star Wars motif. So that's the main theme, but it's also the theme that depicts Luke Skywalker anytime you hear it, especially in the original 3 films. So, for example, the very first time that we ever meet Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, they're out in the desert, and his aunt calls his name, shouts his name. There's been music before, and all of a sudden the music stops, and the horn plays. And that's it. But it's enough to let you know that it's Luke. I should mention, too, because of something we're going to listen to in a little bit, that this tune does have 2 strains. In other words, there's a first part of it and a second part of it. So we all know that part. The second part is... So that's the B strain of that tune. Another tune that shows up in the very first film and quite early on is a theme that's associated originally with Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's sort of the Jedi Master. We don't know that yet. We know him as Ben Kenobi. And that tune is also probably pretty recognizable. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi's theme. But it also becomes known as the Force theme. Basically the religion, if you want to call it that, of Star Wars.
It's interesting that Wagner employed this with opera and that John Williams had the sort of presence of mind to bring that to film.
Yeah. When George Lucas was in sort of the final production phase of Star Wars, he called it over and over again to Johnny, as he knew him, John Williams. He said, this is a space opera. And he said, it's so important for me that the audience feels comfortable with something. And they're not going to feel comfortable with what they're seeing on the screen because it's totally foreign to them. It's lightsabers, which nobody's ever heard of. They're kind of a laser sword. And then there's blasters, which are like, laser guns and all of this. And it's characters we've never seen. He said, I really think that we would be best served by having an extremely traditional, romantic score that uses those ideas of the leitmotif. So it really, frankly, was John Williams and the Star Wars score that brought back this style of film composing. Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you have any other favorite movie soundtracks?
I do actually. And that episode was so wonderful. And Brett Mitchell has gone on to be the assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra. Go, Brett!
Wow, yes, indeed. Congrats.
So most recently, my favorite movie soundtrack has been it's this movie that, let's see, to sum it up in a few words, it's Iranian Western feminist vampire noir.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah, just imagine that. It's beautifully filmed. It's called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and it has one of the coolest soundtracks I've ever heard. It's got everything from classical music to really great indie rock to just this, atmospheric stuff from Iran. It's really, really interesting.
Wow. Do you know offhand who's the composer? Or it sounds like there may be multiple composers.
Yeah, there are multiple composers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
So it sounds like your experience with producing Classical Classroom has really started to affect the way that you listen to music in general.
It really has. And I kind of didn't even realize it until, all of a sudden I realized I was listening to a classical music CD in my car.
By accident?
And I was like, I took this home with me on purpose and put it into the CD player. I was like, who am I right now? Also, I really like it.
That is so cool. So,
Yeah.
What do you listen to nowadays when you're not at work, when you're not at the radio station, when you're not producing Classical Classroom? Or I know you're very active with running. You run half marathons, and you also do really cool trips tracking down locales from TV shows like Twin Peaks. When you're having your travel time, exercise time, downtime, what are you listening to these days?
Let's see. I got really excited about the latest Slater-Kinney album,
Okay.
No Cities to Love. So that has been going on.
There are no cities, no cities to love. There are no cities, no cities to love. It's not the cities, it's the weather we love.
There's also a guy that my brother recently turned me on to. His name, and I'm probably totally butchering it, he's a Russian guy. His name is DJ Ogorets.
Okay.
And he has these amazing videos that go with his songs online. I'm actually going to send you one because I think you'll appreciate it.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Cool. We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, and he's super fun, and you can get all of his music for free. It's downloadable.
Oh,
for
you're
free.
kidding. Wow.
Yeah, no, he's so cool.
Everything I ever wanted, everything I ever dreamed will come true tomorrow morning.
My final question for you is, with all this exposure to such a wide variety of music, are you starting to feel inspired to learn to play something yourself?
Oh man, yeah. So when I was a kid, I played trumpet.
Oh, cool. Wow.
And there's actually an episode of Classical Classroom where two guys gave me a trumpet lesson, and so if you'd like to hear my horrible playing,
Aw.
it's available. I haven't
See, it
practiced
speaks to
in
your
a long
courage.
time.
Speaks to your amazing
Yeah.
courage. Wow. Putting it out
My
there.
courage to be an idiot. To
No.
no, it was really fun.
So somebody wants to find the trumpet as being an instrument in which you make a strange sound in the one end and hope and pray that when the sound gets out the other end of it, that it sounds a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, I am grabbing my mouthpiece
Okay.
and my trumpet. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the mouthpiece just underneath your lips, like you're blowing across a Coke bottle.
Okay.
All right, nice and easy, nice and relaxed, almost like a flute. And as we do that, as we blow across it, now we're going to roll the mouthpiece up so it's touching our lips. There we go.
First try.
It sounded like a dying duck.
Daffy Duck is in the building, people. So. Excellent. So we are
Okay.
off to the races. So let's try the same thing again. And this time, let's just focus the corners of our lips just outside the mouthpiece just a little bit as we do that. So let's do the same thing again. Take a big breath. Yeah, there we go.
I don't know. I think you're a pro.
I think so. I
Give me a
think
head
so.
rush.
Throw the red cat downtown to find out she's been playing some sessions that night. All right.
And then I played guitar.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I've always wanted to have a music studio in my house where I could just play around with instruments and, you know, I don't know though, but I like listening to it. I think my final answer is I like listening to it more than I like playing it.
Well, I hope one of these days you'll have your next future podcast series will be Dacia Clay Learns to Play the Piano or something like that.
God help us all.
Dacia, thank you so much for being on the show. What a delight to have you on, and thank you for all that you're doing just to expose, ordinary folks to the wonderful world of classical music.
Thanks for having me, Hugh. It was great to talk to you, and good luck with your new show.
Oh, thank you so much. This episode of A Musical Life has been brought to you by Audible.com, the leading online source for great audiobooks for your iPhone, Android, or MP3 player. Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. If you'd like to dive deeper into the world of classical music, then I think you'll really enjoy How to Listen to and Understand Great Music by Professor Robert Greenberg. Filled with entertaining anecdotes and a witty, informative style, Professor Greenberg's lectures will give you a deeper understanding of the musical language and help you hear and understand what the greatest composers in history are actually saying to us. To download your free copy of How to Listen to and Understand Great Music or any other audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/A Musical Life. Again, that's audibletrial.com/A Musical Life for your free audiobook. For links to all the music featured in this episode, be sure to visit the show notes at amusicallife.com. You'll also find links to the Classical Classroom podcast, as well as a video of the episode where Dacia learns to play the trumpet from two musicians from the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. And be sure to leave a comment or send me your feedback by email at stories@amusicallife.com. I'd love to hear from you. We just finished week 3 of our contest to celebrate the launch of A Musical Life podcast, and we have a new winner. Kevin from Japan is getting a free copy of Explorations for Keyboard and Orchestra by Dream Theater keyboard wizard Jordan Rudess. Congratulations, Kevin. Thanks so much for joining our family. And we still have 5 weeks left in our contest, with new special prizes every week. This week's prize will be a beautiful album by Gaelic singer Isabel Ann Martin, Dúslach is Or, which is Gaelic for dust and gold. To sign up for our contest, visit amusicallife.com/contest. It's completely free, and every participant will automatically get a special thank you gift, an MP3 track of my performance of Clair de Lune by Debussy. Once again, that's amusicallife.com/contest. If you like this show, please tell a friend or share a link on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to A Musical Life through iTunes or Stitcher or with your favorite podcast playing app. And consider posting a review in iTunes by going to amusicallife.com/review. We're currently listed near the top of iTunes' new and noteworthy section of the music podcast category. Your iTunes subscriptions and reviews help to share this show with other listeners, so thank you for all your support. Special thanks to Todd Huslander for his technical assistance and for co-producing Classical Classroom together with Dacia. A Musical Life's associate producer is Allison Pockris, and Paul Sung provided production assistance. Until next time, I'm Hugh Sung, and I wish you a musical life.